A crane hangs motionless over an unfinished tower at dusk, and a set of keys sits on a table below it. A family is still paying for a home that is not there. Now pull back and see what this country actually built. In one generation, this stretch of rice paddies and fishing villages became a skyline of towers laced with high-speed rail. In just 3 years, it poured more cement than the United States used in the entire 20th century. This is not an illusion. It is one of the most extraordinary economic transformations in history. But every tower has a creditor, and the biggest builder on earth borrowed against a future that had not arrived yet. China built the future. Now it has to pay for it. This is not another collapse prophecy. It is something slower and much harder to reverse. The honest frame, not another slogan. The country used the future to finance the present, and the bills are arriving faster than the future. Welcome to Financial Historian, where money, power, and history meet. To understand how China got here, go back to 1978. Because the couple whose keys sit on that table did nothing reckless. They saved, they waited, they signed. They trusted the same machine that raised the skyline outside their window. The crane stopped anyway. Now they're the ones paying. Go back to 1978, to the edge of a village where a rice field met the first road ever poured there. A young man and woman, still children then, watched a truck arrive with more steel than the whole county had seen in a lifetime. They did not know it, but they were watching the machine switch on. That morning, they were only cold and curious, standing where a port would soon be. Deng Xiaoping opened the economy to markets, while the party kept its hand on the wheel. That hybrid, market ambition, party coordination, is the whole story in miniature. The market lit the ambition. The party coordinated the ports, banks, and roads. The honest advantage was never just cheap hands. It was a whole ecosystem, suppliers, docks, and power lines ready before the first order arrived. But every machine is built with its flaw already inside it. To grow this fast, the country asked its families to save rather than spend. And save they did. By the 2010s, Chinese families were saving roughly a third of everything they earned, knowing no one would catch them if they fell. A nation of savers builds a fortress, and a market where almost no one dares to spend. So the reforms bought a miracle and borrowed a weakness in the same breath. The coordination that built the roads and the ports was the same coordination that would one day decide who gets to keep their savings and who does not. Towers rose where old houses once stood, changing the street for good. On Jiefang Street, a couple walked into a sales office and signed for an apartment in Tower 7. The tower did not exist yet. That was the point. Their deposit would help pour the foundation next door, and their monthly payments would raise the walls floor by floor. Here is the loop this couple had just joined without knowing it. The government sells land to a developer. The developer sells the apartments before building them. Families take mortgages on those unbuilt homes, and the banks that fund them keep the whole cycle turning. Round and round the loop goes. Through the 2000s, land sales supplied local governments with up to 40% of their revenue. The machine kept working as long as new towers kept rising behind it. In August of 2020, Beijing drew 3 red lines, hard limits on developer debt. The credit stopped. Evergrande collapsed under liabilities of more than $300 billion. The crane over Tower 7 stopped turning. The couple kept paying every month. The home they had bought with 20 years of hope stood half-built against the sky, unfinished, still owed. The asset meant to guarantee their future was now worth less than they had already paid, and the crane above it stood still. So why doesn't Beijing simply step in and rescue the market? It sounds like the obvious move. It sounds easy. It is not. The trouble does not sit in one place. It ripples. Start with the supplier who poured the concrete for Tower 7 and was never paid. He lays off his crew. The workers stop spending, so the shop on the corner tightens too. The local budget once drew 40% of its revenue from selling land. Now the buyers vanish. The banks hold paper against half-built towers worth less than the loans. And the family? They save harder, not out of confidence, but out of fear. Consider the credit clerk who first processed the couple's contract on Jiefang Street. She once stamped it as a promise. Now she reviews the same file from behind a different desk, and it reads as a liability. Here is the paradox. Beijing can rescue an institution, pour money into a bank, keep the doors open, but it cannot rescue an expectation. Confidence is not a balance sheet. Underneath the towers sit shell companies called financing vehicles, borrowing against land that has not yet been sold. Outside economists put the hidden local debt somewhere near $7 to $11 trillion, a bill no rescue erases, only moves. Every rolled-up map on that desk marks a budget line someone is fighting to keep. On the edge of the same city, where a rice field once fed a village, a battery factory now runs 3 shifts a day. A shift supervisor walks the floor at dawn, past robots that never sleep, and she is proud of what her hands help build. The city that once sold land to pay its bills now sells capacity instead. The pivot is real, and it is enormous. Bigger than the debt, bigger than the empty towers. One company, CATL, supplies roughly a third of the world's electric car batteries, and every pack it ships leans harder on foreign buyers. Down the coast, Chinese shipyards now deliver roughly half of all new ships built on Earth. This is not a bluff. It is real strength, the kind the collapse stories keep forgetting. But the strength runs into the same wall. Weak demand at home pushes goods abroad, and exports on that scale invite tariffs. So the answer to tariffs is a second line, built to sell to buyers who no longer exist. So the loop closes back on that couple, still paying every month, still waiting for keys that have not come. And now the arithmetic itself is turning. The population is aging. Graduates outnumber the jobs the old model built for them, and a home in a shrinking city becomes a liability instead of a promise. The shift supervisor's own daughter may never buy a tower like the one her parents are still paying off. The strengths and the weaknesses, it turned out, were the same thing. That same pattern, a strength doubling as a weakness, has a precedent worth weighing honestly. In 1990, Japan, then the world's second-largest economy, hit a similar wall and stagnated for decades. It is tempting to close the file right there, to call China the next Japan and move on. But the comparison is incomplete, and the ways it breaks down make the task harder, not easier. Japan was already rich when its bubble burst in 1990. China has to grow old before it gets there. So what is real, plainly? The coordination. Ports, banks, and roads still move on command. The engineers, the ports, 40 years of industrial depth, none of that is a trick. Control can delay the moment the loss is recognized. It can spread the pain across banks and budgets and years. But control cannot make every road pay for itself, or turn an empty tower into a home someone needs. The old model did not fail because it was broken. It worked too well and wrote its debts into the system. Come back to the same corner of Jiefang Street. The crane in the distance has started to rust. The couple stands there, older now, facing the rusting crane with the keys still in hand. A house is a promise you cannot eat, and a promise is not the same thing as a home. So let me ask you directly one time. What would you trust with 20 years of savings? Tell us in the comments. This is Financial Historian, where money, power, and history meet.